Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. This is our very first episode of the year, and we're going to focus it on predictions for 2025. So Michael Marchuk and I, your co-host for Transform Now, we're here and we invited a special guest, our colleague, Dr. Lou Bachenheimer. Lou, thank you for joining us.
Hey, all. Thanks for having me, Brad.
It's great to have you. And what we did was pretty simple. We went our separate ways. We all came up with 6 predictions for 2025, and we don't know what each other came up with. So this will be the first time for us to see what each of us put together. And we're going to go through those predictions. We're going to react to them. We might throw a few tomatoes at some of them along the way. And then we'll see at the end how many we had in common. I'm assuming we're going to have at least a couple that are very, very similar, but you never know. We're three.
I just been looking forward towards the end of 2025 when we look back and say, "Oh my gosh, did we get it wrong?"
Oh no, I think we should definitely revisit at the end of the year and see who got the most right.
There you go.
I think that's a fantastic idea. So before we jump in, let's just each give a quick intro. Tell us what you do for SS&C Blue Prism. And also, I'll add a personal one. What's something happening in 2025, a personal milestone, or just something that you're looking forward to that's more personal? If we could add that to the intro, that would be good. So, Dr. Lou, let me pass it over to you to get us started.
Awesome. So, hey y'all, I'm Dr. Lou Bachenheimer. I'm the CTO of the Americas for SS&C Blue Prism. I've been with the company for 6.5 years now. So, quite some time, worn many different hats during that period, but it's been a lot of fun in this role post-acquisition because we've been able to, act like a kid in a candy store with all the new tech SS&C brought on board. So been had my fingers in the cookie jar of AI quite a bit, and excited to talk about where I think it's going to be going. As far as what I'm looking forward to, so in 2025, my oldest child will be turning 5, and that's an exciting one because that means that she can finally start signing up for lessons. So she's gonna start off with piano and jiu-jitsu. So super excited.
They do that at the same time?
No, different lessons.
So Lou, your oldest child is turning 5. My oldest child just turned 30. So let's see, there's a little bit of an age difference here, but
We're old enough to take some lessons.
all right. Michael, how about you?
Michael Marchuk. I've been with SS&C Blue Prism now for over 8 years, and like Lou, worn many, many hats. Love doing our podcast with Brad. Brad and I have so much fun doing this podcast, so I'm really looking forward to continuing that in 2025. For Blue Prism, SS&C Blue Prism, what I do on a daily job, though, is I run our advisory program, which includes a lot of work with our methodologies, which helps people adopt and adapt to the changes that the technology that we're developing bring to them. And from a personal perspective for this year, Brad, you know that my Kindle is like red hot all the time because I am continually reading. I'm pushing forward with that again to try to not break it, but push real hard so that I can get up to 35 books in this year. Last year I did about 32. So
I'm Brad Hairston, and like Michael, I do a lot of thought leadership. That includes writing and presenting, podcasting, webinars, you name it, on enterprise AI. I work with a lot of our partners, including the advisory partners like McKinsey and Bain and BCG. I manage the relationship with them. And my milestone for this year, something I'm really looking forward to, my wife and I are celebrating our 35th anniversary. So
congratulations.
That's a pretty big deal. And we're excited to celebrate that. All right, Dr. Lou, let's start this off with you. Why don't you take us through your top 6 predictions for 2025?
All right, well, I am going to start with a hot take in that I think we're going to see generative AI having a much smaller role overall. Not to say that it's not going to be used, it's not going to be incredibly useful, but right now, it's still relatively new. People are trying to come up with all sorts of different use cases, but I think it's going to be scaled down, focusing more on triage and structuring of unstructured data before passing those on to traditional solutions like non-generative machine learning or pure rules-based automation or rules-based capabilities, because those are going to be able to mitigate a lot of the costs and risks you typically see with generative AI while still seeing a lot of the benefits. As far as my second piece here, I think we're going to see a lot more agentic use cases where we're going to have an agent for absolutely everything. Now, another hot take here is I don't think that's going to last for very long for two reasons. One, we see lots of talk around this idea of an AI agent. Forbes is describing this as a piece of software that's capable of learning, creating actions, and then executing them. And while that sounds great, and there certainly are some use cases, at enterprise scale, having AI create an action and then execute it is a governance disaster waiting to happen. There's so many things that can go wrong. And at the end of the day, you typically don't need the AI to be actually executing it when you have other automation technologies that can just make an API call to. So I think we're going to see a lot of it in the beginning, but then people are going to look at the cost, they're going to look at the potential errors, and they're going to get back to the issue with chatbots, which is that people really don't like talking to them. So we're going to see them start to phase out. I think instead of having, individual agents for everything, there'll be an agent or an agentic front end that you can still use your natural language to interact with. But once messy, complicated, unstructured humans are dealt with, the back end will be more streamlined. For my third thing, I think cybersecurity is going to start an arms race. Cybersecurity is always a key point in any technology office. AI is going to help there as far as building up more secure environments, but also new ways to attack them. I also expect we'll start seeing more bad actors targeting models themselves and the actual underlying data. If you can get an LLM to push out incorrect data, that could be huge for a bad actor. Next, transitioning out of pure tech, I think we're going to see a lot of AI being leveraged in pure scientific research. A couple reasons here. One of these is that it is a buzzword. However you feel about it, whether it's the best thing ever or just another trend, it is a buzzword, which means that if you want to get grant for doing your research, targeting this is going to make sense. On top of that, in 2024, 2 Nobel Prizes, both in chemistry and physics, were awarded involving AI. So we are going to see that as a driving factor. And finally, when you really think about what AI is very good at, it's good at learning patterns from data and then generating content based off of those patterns. If we're looking at just that first piece, that's a lot of research in a nutshell. So being able to identify patterns from large data sets in a way that we couldn't before, I think that's going to really take off in the scientific research community. After that, I think we're going to see a lot more AI usage in robotics. On the one hand, we're already seeing it in software robotics and automation, but I think there's going to be more and more physical robots that start applying it. We use, the combination of generative AI, and automation techniques or software robotics to automate almost anything you can be doing at a computer. But there's lots of work that's being done outside of computers. So I think that's where we're going to start seeing a new spike. And then finally, as we start seeing the cost and risk of LLMs increase, the cost going up because right now a lot of it's being run at a loss. We're seeing companies like Microsoft spending more on electricity to power their generative AI practices than the GDPs of many countries. We're also seeing applications out there for building data centers with built-in nuclear power plants. So, the cost is going to go up. And also, as more folks and bad actors start attacking the models, we're going to see the risks increase. So I'd expect to see more of a migration away from these extensive generic LLMs, and focus more on either small language models or large quantitative models, where we can start predicting mathematically more use cases, such as in finance or weather patterns. So that's where I see things coming. Put it all in a nice bow. I think generative AI is certainly incredibly powerful, and we're going to get better at using it, which means we'll know where to focus using it and where to avoid it.
Very good. Michael, why don't you share your thoughts on Dr. Liu's predictions?
I had some overlaps that it'll be interesting to talk about, because there's some things that you touched on, and I extended a little differently and had a different perspective on it. But certainly the agentic theme, I think, is going to continue. So I agree with that. You're going to see it's going to be agentic everywhere. I think it's going to get refined, as you mentioned, over time, though. What I thought was interesting is you talk about the arms race and the models themselves becoming at risk. We've seen this in a couple different things. In fact, I read a story the other day about how some of the Chinese open source models are actually hard coding stuff inside of them. So while they're open source, if you don't really open the source to go look at what's going on, you may not find these hidden gems that they've stuck inside them. And the other thing too, I think you mentioned with any of these models, when you have data that's being trained on it and a publicly available, even open source model, the data that's trained on, it becomes critical to how it's going to respond. So I think you're right. I believe we're going to see that for sure being an attack vector for the bad actors. I can't wait to see more physical robots coming in. I think we're looking more and more like iRobot every day. And I think this is going to be interesting to see how these bipedal humanoid robots that we have all over the place now start integrating some of these, these small language model pieces where they have them contained within. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, Michael and I made at least one attempt to get a physical robot company on the podcast the last year.
Maybe this year
we'll get their attention. But didn't got a lot of crickets chirping on that one, I'll say. Liu, I love your predictions. I think they're all really good. I only had one in common with you, and that's the last one about SLMs. So you'll see what I have to say on that. The agentic piece, certainly agentic is the hot topic. I just continue to believe it's going to take a little longer for companies to get there, to be willing to let AI, agents basically roam around and make decisions and do what they want to do. I think what's more likely to happen, at least in the next year or two, is just we start seeing the agentic AI in the enterprise, the front end of all of the big enterprise apps like ServiceNow and SAP and Oracle and what have you. That makes so much sense to have that. I was shocked, though, when I saw a quote from Gartner. This is from October of last year. They said only 1% of enterprise software applications have agentic AI right now, and they predict it will get up to 33% by 2028, 3 years from now.
I think it depends on how you're defining it, because if you're talking about agentic AI as just a LLM-based chat front end that you can interact with using natural language, sure, I see that exploding, especially for things like an internal enterprise search for finding the right information.
Yeah,
that's going to be huge. But if we're talking about the way some of these analysts are describing it, where it's really an agent that will understand enough to build out custom actions before executing them, I don't see any enterprise rolling that out because it's too much of a risk. There's too much that can go wrong. Not at scale, at least.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, very good. Well, let's move on to Mr. Marchuk. So, Michael, are you ready to dive in?
I am ready to dive in. So My first one, I'm going to go a little provocative here and say we're going to start seeing the introduction of AI personas. And what's an AI persona, you may ask? Well, I see an AI persona being an amalgam of both the agentic concept of being able to do specific activities and work, wrapped together with very specific skill sets or targeted skill sets. So you have a persona that you would potentially apply towards tax work within your organization, or accounting, or operations, or shipping, or something along those lines, where a specific activity or actions happen within those agents in that role, but that role then is tailored based on the training that the small language models use within that particular persona. So I see this is going to be something that is going to emerge in 2020, 2025. Do I see it happening everywhere? No, but I definitely see this as a potential next step, taking agents, which we've seen the concept of agents with our digital workers for years now, and the training that they were and how they apply it in an organization, but taking this next step of wrapping it all together so we have it filling a specific role within an organization that then could be used across multiple organizations. So you might find a tax persona that could be sold to anyone who is in the UK, or anyone who's in Germany, or anyone who's in the United States in a specific state or whatnot. And that persona then could apply to all of the organizations who could leverage that from it. So that's my first one, is this whole idea of personas wrapping agents with very specific training knowledge.
Okay.
The second one we go to is, like Lou said, it's going to get way more expensive. With all of those nuclear power plants that are powering these data centers now. And it's funny how data centers used to be measured in square footage. Now they're measured in megawatts. We're seeing that the subsidies that investors have been putting into companies like OpenAI and others are going to start to dry up a little bit, as there's expectations for some returns on those investments. It's great to have wicked technology going out there doing amazing things, but if it's not making money for long enough, people will tire of it. So I foresee that this is going to go that next step of where there's going to be some cash returns required, which means that I think it's going to be a little more expensive. The other thing too is, as companies are adopting this more, it's one thing to say, hey, everybody go out and, we'll get a few people an OpenAI $20 a month subscription, to saying, hey, I want to embed this into my processes now, and I need to have X number of API calls that I have to purchase every month. That's going to get very expensive as we go forward. So I fully foresee that AI is going to get much more expensive this year and going forward, as the costs are become more transparent. For my third one, we talked about, Lou mentioned this, small language models. I foresee that the expenses that we're seeing for these large language model operations are going to get revised, so that a small language model, like I mentioned before, say a tax small language model, it doesn't necessarily need to know about Paris. It doesn't need to know about, how many depths of the oceans are, in various areas. It only needs to know about taxes in a specific locale. So that small language model then can be very highly tailored. And being a tailored small language model, it has much smaller costs associated with operating it, because the responses are very tailored to the requests for that particular action. So I see that as being one way of lowering the costs from a generic standpoint, but I also see it as a way of focusing expertise into these small language models, rather than a broad level large language model that just knows everything and requires massive data centers to train. Fourth one, kind of going back to this one with our AI personas. Another way of looking at this is, when you've bundled up the agent and a specific skill or task, now you can start building into it some of your branding or some of your corporate ethos into that specific agent. So hiring, for example, a very particular agent persona that may know taxes in the UK, but now it's within your organization. How do taxes in the UK affect our organization? And everything that goes through that now is tailored back into my organization, my role as a organizational co-pilot for this agent persona. now can tailor the responses and the requests back and forth. So it's very, very fine tuned for that organization. And that we go across legal, sales, HR, advertising, and whatnot, to the point where we have the branding and the tone of voice coming across with all of the responses and expectations that we have for these AI agents. So again, it's taking that concept of a generic capability, an agent, and bringing in the skills as the persona, and then coupling that even further with the drive or the specifics of your organization. Our fifth one is building custom AI hardware. Now, we've already seen this, Brad and I have mentioned this before, one of our pulse checks, that GPU hardware coming from NVIDIA specifically has been fantastically wonderful. But it does a lot of stuff. GPUs in general are like CPUs. They're very, very broad and open to be able to use for many different things, including gaming and other things. They're really good at doing floating point math, which is fantastic, which is what is necessary for some of the stuff. But some of the actions that an LLM requires are only using a fraction of these GPUs. So by tailoring custom-made hardware, I believe that these LLM and operations of the LLMs can become much more efficient leveraging these types of hardware. So perhaps we still train on GPU clusters, but we actually execute on some very specific ASICs or specific application-specific integrated circuits that will do the work in a much better, more efficient way, because it doesn't have to do all the other things that a GPU is capable of doing. So that's why I kind of see we're going to go that way from a hardware perspective. And then finally, kind of wrapping it all together here, everything with hardware, we're going to need a peopleware upgrade here. People are a big challenge, and coming from where I sit in terms of our methodologies and how we leverage adoption, this weighs very heavily on me to see this within organizations, because this is not just another technology we work out there to help people be a little bit more efficient. This is a sort of sea change in how we approach work and how we approach the roles that we currently have versus the roles that we should have within an organization as a person. And while we can roll out the tools and buy people OpenAI subscriptions left and right, if they're not able to leverage them to actually get better at what they do for the organization, then it's really just money spent on nothing. So getting training to the people who are actually leveraging these technologies in the most effective way is going to be the next step that organizations absolutely need to focus on. And, Brad and I have gone through, in fact, our last pulse check was really talking a lot about that in terms of some of the training and the surveys that have gone on, that this is a deficiency that a lot of organizations see. So I really see that as be our next frontier, is to get our people ready for all this new technology.
Good stuff, Michael. Lou, let me defer to you. Why don't you weigh in on some of Michael's predictions, and then I'll go.
So for the most part, I think these are really good. I think your call out about the hardware is especially relevant. As we see those costs going up, we're going to look for ways to have them go back down. As far as the personas, I agree and disagree, because I think you're 100% on that there are going to be AI personas that are trained in specific areas. There's really three parts to that process, right? You need to have first the user interface. So having the LLM be able to interact with people. So that's your typical agent. Then you have your actual knowledge base, the AI itself, and then you have the actions they're taking. I don't think that having the AI take the actions is going to be something that gets scaled out. So I think that will be plugging into pre-existing automation technology. Once intent and data are structured, the actual execution is the easy part. So I think, though, that means that where we're going to see a lot isn't necessarily the agents, but the trained models as far as the personas. Because, again, I don't see a world where I want to talk with 8 different AI agents and say, I need to do XYZ. Which AI am I supposed to ask about that? It's just not going to happen. We're going to have a single front-end AI that does all that triage for us. And once we've moved the messy people out of the way, it's straight through processing from there. But yeah, as far as the peopleware, I think that's a very good call out, because having the tools, again, is meaningless if people aren't using them and using them in a way that makes them cost effective.
So I would just add, I liked your predictions as well, Michael. Really, really good. Your second one about Gen AI or AI costs going through the, really taking are surging in 2025. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you look at OpenAI, right? They came out, they changed their model. They want to be for profit. And then what did they do in 2024? They lost like $9 billion. So I don't think all these models and all these free, chatbots that they provide will probably remain free for long, or the functionality will get so diminished that you just can't help but get a subscription of some sort. And that's just a small piece of it. I think the companies that are using Gen AI at scale, they're going to see this cost really, really increase. And so they're going to have to be smart about, how they use it, where they use it. And I think it's one of many factors that will drive them more toward using SLMs like we've been talking about. So your point number 3 is spot on. I have a similar one in my list because I think that just makes so much sense, especially with the increased openness to using open source models. Many companies, our company as well, finding success using open source small language models or even large language models to automate, certain tasks. We've had success with that. So those are all good. And then the custom AI hardware. Yeah, I think the big AI companies, the big tech companies, they're tired of having one supplier, that being NVIDIA, and all of their money and their budgets and everything gets sent over to NVIDIA. So I think for that reason, they're going to look for more specialized, more affordable hardware to run their models. And then I think the energy demand and the issue we have globally about not having enough power to support all these data centers that have cropped up, I think that also is going to push businesses and countries to look for a more efficient AI hardware so they can reduce the energy required and be better for the environment and all those things. So really good stuff. And I'm going to tell you right off the top here that I went in a very different direction with a lot of mine. So,
looking forward to seeing yours.
They all have an AI element to them. I will say that, but they're definitely kind of all over the map. So my first prediction is around deep fakes, and I believe that deep fakes are going to be one of the aspects of AI that will be regulated in the very early going here by local and state and federal governments. But I think there will also be a large number of new startups that come out that focus on being able to detect AI generated content, because the deep fakes, I mean, you guys have seen them and you understand how good they've become. It's just opening the door to so many bad actors who are thinking of ways they're going to use this to earn a buck in a illicit manner. There are people that are going to damage reputation of people by creating deep fakes. I messed around with one of the startups that gave me the ability to create an avatar of myself, and I was able to tell it to say things in like 10 different languages. And I took the video and I shared it with family and friends, and many of them thought I had gone and taken lessons on how to speak in these different languages. And I said, no, that was all AI generated. And they were all amazed. And I would say most of them were horrified at the same time. So I love deepfake. I mean, I think it's a really cool aspect of AI. I think there can be good uses of it, but I think there are just as many bad uses. And so it needs to be regulated. And I think that's going to be one of the first to get focused upon. My second one, and this one, to me, immediately what jumps out in my mind is the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know if you've seen it, but, he basically has an AI friend that becomes his friend, his confidant, advising him on everything. He's talking to the AI. Of course, it's Scarlett Johansson's voice, so I don't blame him for getting connected to it. But I think a positive, take on this that we will see, and that's why I have it as a prediction, is, using it as a mental health application. So giving, personalized therapy and emotional support to people who need it. I mean, there aren't enough therapists. A lot of people don't like doing therapy over Zoom or a web interface, and they don't want to go in and meet someone. I think this is an area where, AI could fill a gap, and it really could become an effective means of giving people something they need to manage anxiety and stress or depression. And we've seen AI become much more emotionally intelligent. Michael did a podcast with a version of AI called Hume AI, and it's a very empathetic, emotionally intelligent take on AI, and it was very impressive. I listened to that show, and I think they are figuring out how to make AI, more presentable, more empathetic, and get people's attention. So I think there could be a positive play on this in the mental health area. AI-assisted search. I think it's going to overtake ad-driven search. Michael and I have talked about this on our podcast here in recent weeks. So OpenAI added search to ChatGPT at the end of last year. Google now says they're headed in this direction. So I think, people are ready for something beyond the traditional Google. I search and I realize that most of the results are going to be ad-driven or advertiser-driven. I want a better experience. I want to be able to take a picture or play a video and then let my search engine use that and go find where I can find that product or, find that musician who played a song. I mean, it's a variation of things that we already see in play, but I think doing that through the search engine, the search interface with AI is going to be a much better experience. So I think it's going to take off, and I think people are going to bail on, purely ad driven, and they're going to move in this direction. It may be with Google. I'm not saying it's away from Google, because they apparently are headed in the same direction. My fourth prediction, I told you it's all over the map. I think nuclear energy is going to assume a much bigger role in not just addressing global power, demand, which has surged to all-time highs, but I think it will specifically play a big role in providing the energy needed by all these AI data centers. And we've already seen some of the big tech companies do things like this that are very unnatural for them. Microsoft is like rebooting 3 Mile Island to provide power for their big new data center. Google has a relationship with a nuclear plant. I forget the name of it, but I mean, it's absolutely going to be a valid source of energy for AI and for big tech. And I think it also has the added advantage of being a very clean, very efficient form of fuel. If in the US it can get over all the negative PR that came out of the 80s and 90s. Of course, Chernobyl has something to do with that too. But I think it will find a way to bring people on board. And now that Microsoft and Google and all these companies are starting to leverage it, I think we will see an uptick in nuclear. Number 5, Michael, you're not surprised by this one. I think cryptocurrencies and blockchain will finally get a bit of a bump that they've been waiting for. I know a lot of people are going to raise their eyebrows at this because they don't think it'll ever happen. But especially in the U.S., where we have a new administration coming in that's very crypto, very blockchain friendly. We have a lot of other elected officials who are crypto friendly. And I think the time is just right with AI, with the data centers, with just the convergence of a lot of different things to finally get this over the hump. And you even see some of the large financial services companies starting to edge in this direction, like JP Morgan and others. So I think we're going to see a spike in it. And I think before too long, we'll all be using crypto to pay for our bills or Christmas presents or whatever. Even you, Michael. My 6th one and final one, and this is the one we've all said, is I do think SLM usage will become more prominent than large language model usage. And we talked a lot about cost. I think there's also the fact that you can, I think, have more privacy. You can have a better way to integrate it with your own data. Everything can be done kind of in-house in a more private environment, and it can be more specialized. That seems to be a trend that people want. They don't want the generic LLM that's been trained on the internet. They want something that is industry relevant, that has other levels of specificity that make it very, very useful and practical for them, for their employees, for their customers. And I think SLMs just play right into that. And going back to the point, Michael, you made about AI hardware, we're even seeing some very small AI hardware products be created that themselves are housing, models with 3 billion parameters on them, which is amazing that you can have that on a little chip. But that the SLMs are going to be more prevalent on the smaller hardware, the more efficient AI hardware that's starting to come out. And so I think we're gonna definitely see an SLM uptick, and the big large language model companies will probably adapt, and they'll probably get more into the SLMs. But that's my take on that one. So I will stop there, and I'll let both of you weigh in on my crazy predictions. Any thoughts?
I gotta say, it's nice that you went, in a completely different direction, because it gives us so much to talk about.
It does.
Hey, like looking at these, I think the first one, 100%, but I do hope that they delay passing any regulation until after JFK is the guest on this podcast.
Yeah.
Looking at brings us into the second one. I think that one will be really interesting because I don't think we have the research to know how therapy will work if people know they're talking to, an AI as opposed to person. But that's certainly an area I bet the research is already being done. Side note, I think it's funny that you brought up the movie Her, because OpenAI and they're still being sued by Scarlett Johansson because she doesn't want them to use her voice, and you're like, I'm going to do it anyway. So those two kind of tie together in that way. I hope you're right about the AI assisted search, but I hope it also gets a lot better, because right now, you try doing a Google search, and above the 8 things that say sponsored, you have the AI piece, which I've found to be like coin flip, whether it's correct or incorrect information. It's definitely confused me a few times when it's like, oh, I need to scroll down and see this isn't actually real. But yeah, it'll be very interesting. Completely agree on, the SLMs. I think it is funny that the only unified theme we have between the three of us, and with nuclear energy, that's another one that's going to be interesting. We've had a lot of recent improvements in fusion, but none that's at the point where we're going to be able to see it soon. Mm-hmm. And while it is a lot cleaner, we're going to need to figure out what we're doing with the waste. I used to be in research in nanotech, and we would deal with radioactive materials from time to time. And I'll say this. When I was doing research, some of the smartest people in the world on these topics worked in the national labs in Los Alamos. And the best solution they had for dealing with this nuclear waste was to put it in barrels full of clay kitty litter. And that was not always 100% effective, especially if someone uses the wrong litter. But the fact that we have really smart people and that's the best they can come up with, if that starts being really scaled out, we're going to need something better.
We're going to need more kitty litter is what you're saying.
Yeah. So much more kitty litter. Or maybe a rocket to the sun. That solves everything.
Yeah.
But
No risk there.
yeah, fun stuff.
I have some counterpoints to some of Brad's.
Uh-oh.
Well,
Okay.
While I agree with them in general, I have some counterpoints. So, deepfake piece, totally agree. We need some sort of regulation or something to be able to define what a deepfake is, because quite in fact, you start talking about what you had done with HeyGen to be able to create your speech in multiple languages. That could be considered a deepfake, but then again, it's an application of that technology in a way that is potentially positive. So, understanding where that technology could be used in a negative way for a bunch of other bad things, which we can all imagine in our mind at the moment. How do we address that while not squelching the technology overall? So the regulation piece of things will be very difficult when it comes to that. So I'm all for protecting people. I just don't want to over-regulate the capabilities, because there are some very positive things that can come out of it too. So to me, that's a one that's going to be a tough one to walk through. The mental health one, yet another one. I agree in principle, but I also have, we've heard too many stories of, the AI telling someone to kill themselves, and they did. There needs to be some very strong guardrails put in place if folks are using any kind of AI for a mental health application, because it does have the capabilities of perhaps bringing you into a course that isn't necessarily healthy for you. So that's another one. You tread carefully on that one. As for search, I agree that search is going to change. I believe that Google is already pushing past this. I think we're going to see, we talked about this in one of our other shows, the concept of embedding searches that still are ad sponsored in some way into an AI-driven search component is going to be very tricky, because now you have the capability of saying, well, here's an ad that I'm going to embed subtly into the response types that I'm responding back to you by. How do I know? Again, this gets back to deepfake. How do I know if it's hallucinating, if it's giving me accurate results, or if it's giving me ad-based results, which may be accurate, but are also very highly biased towards the person who paid for that particular response? So that one there is another one where not sure how we're going to tread through that one, because it's pretty obvious when we're doing from search how it's likely that none of us are going to go to page 74 to go start our search results, right? We're going to start at that first page, and anything past that first or second page is really irrelevant, because we just don't search beyond that. How do we change that mentality when we look at an AI search, which is going to do a lot of that work for us? How do we get that relevance to be pushed up to our eyeballs so we can see what it is without being so highly biased by those paying for it that we want to go back. We yearn to go back to the days of the standard Google search, right? So again, another one that's going to be tough. And I will not be using cryptocurrencies anytime soon. There we go. All right.
My favorite explanation of cryptocurrencies was that they're basically just beanie babies. People have decided they're really expensive, but at any point in time, someone could, oh wait, no, it's actually worthless, and everything crashes. So, yeah,
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and there's a lot of beholders.
I got some tulips for you, Brad. Here we go.
All right, so gentlemen, it's been a lot of fun just talking about the year and some of the things we expect to happen. And Lou, per your suggestion, we'll regroup at the end of the year, and we'll see how many of our brilliant predictions came true, or maybe none of them comes true.
Well, LQMs, which I will point out being the only one who mentioned, are good at predicting things like human behavior. So maybe next year I can cheat and use one of those.
There you go. That's the way to do it. All right. Well, thanks again for your time, gentlemen. Happy New Year, and bye for now.